Before we get into today's episode, listeners, I just want to thank our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we couldn't bring you this podcast. So today we have two sponsors, the first of which is Restaurant.com. With Restaurant.com, you can save at thousands of restaurants across the country with just a few clicks. Their dining deals range from $5 to $100. They never expire, and they cost a fraction of the face value. Dinner has never been easier with Restaurant.com, used for dine-in, takeout, or delivery. Restaurant.com is offering our listeners 50% off their next purchase by going to www.restaurant.com/podcast. That's www.restaurant.com/podcast for 50% off your next purchase. Restaurant.com, the best deal every meal. And our second sponsor for this episode is Nightcap, the drink spiking prevention scrunchie. Do you ever feel uncomfortable at a bar with your drink exposed? Are you someone who covers their drink with their hand or their napkin? Now you don't have to. Nightcap is a fun solution to a serious problem. It can be worn as a wristband or a hair tie and taken out to cover up your drink at any time. According to alcohol.org, 56% of women have reported having their drink spiked at some point. It's time to take action with Nightcap. With the holidays coming up, giving Nightcap to a friend or a loved one is the perfect way to show that you care about their safety. Go to nightcapit.com, that's NIGHTCAPIT.com, and enter the code BARTALK, all capital letters with a space in between bar and talk, for 20% off your order, valid until November 31st. And now, let's get into the podcast. Welcome back, Inebri-arts. This is Andy of the Inebri-art podcast, and I'm still recording from home, mostly because I've really kind of gotten to like Zoom, and it's been a cool way to meet a lot of cool people from, around the world, really. We've talked to people from all over, and today we are talking to Stef Johnson from the band Mise. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did.
Sweet. I totally got the pronunciation ahead of time, but I'm still pretty happy. I'm not good with names, so I'm taking credit for that one. So welcome to the show, man. Like, what's going on?
Oh, nothing. Just hanging out. I'm actually currently in beautiful Gimli, Manitoba, in Canada.
Nice.
So that, for you Americans, that is north of Fargo, which is Winnipeg, and then north of Winnipeg is Gimli, like a small Icelandic town, like the Lord of the Rings character.
Are you a hockey fan? Are you happy to have the Jets back?
Oh my gosh, yes. Everyone in Canada is always happy to have the Jets back. Like, every Canadian actually has a sweet soft spot for the Jets, because back when I was like a little kid with the team with Teemu Selanne, everyone was just obsessed with the Jets.
Oh, Teemu, yeah, that's right.
Teemu, that was my generation of the Jets. And yeah, when they came back, it was just like, we've got the most amazing people in Winnipeg. We're really salt of the earth kind of people. And if you go to a Jets game in Winnipeg, oh my gosh, like, I think we're the loudest arena by decibel.
Oh, really?
I think in the world. Yeah, because we're just so intense.
We're the most critical down here in Boston. Like, we'll
really?
boo our own team if we don't like it.
Yeah. Yes, you will. And I kind of love that. It's like awesome. Yeah, I just love hockey fans in general, just because there's so much passion there. But yeah, we're big hockey fans. I used to play hockey, and
nice.
As every
what position?
Canadian usually does. Well, I started off as a defenseman, and then I was moved to center because I was the only one who was fit enough to go north and south on the ice. So, yeah, that's what, they always put the fittest people on center, because most people don't want to go help the defense.
Yeah, they got to skate the most. Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny because I was talking about how our Bruins fans will turn on people, and there's been like a huge backlash against Tuukka Rask because he opted out of the playoffs because I don't know if it was COVID, but he was basically, I'm going to stay home, take care of my family, and so I'm assuming it was a COVID thing. But yeah, man, people turned on a dime. We're like, burn him.
Oh, of course, I know, because everyone is just such major fans. Like, they will bleed. They'll bleed Bruins, or they'll bleed Jets. Like it's just they're very. It's kind of like music fans, like most people. Like they're not as intense. Like I think hockey fans are probably one of the most intense. Soccer fans are pretty intense too. Music fans are a little bit more, and like art fans are more like introspective, and they're like, I just quietly love my band. Unless you're like a metal fan, or if you love Motley Crue.
Unless you're a Kiss fan. If you're a Kiss fan, you're
If you're a Kiss or Motley Crue, I find like the Motley Crue fans are really intense people. Or Beatles fans. Beatles fans who think that the Beatles are the only things that exist, like the only band that exists, and like they're great. Don't get me wrong, but when you talk to people who are like Beatles there's nothing else.
Yeah, I feel
it's just the Beatles.
Kiss makes me think of sports fans because if you are into Kiss, like 50% of your wardrobe is Kiss.
Yeah,
you probably have like a Kiss bath towel. You paint your face just like a football fan. Yeah, so
oh my god, that is
Kiss
so
fans
true.
are the sports fans of the music world.
So true.
So we didn't get here to talk about sports.
No, we didn't.
No, but it goes where it goes. So you're in a band. Is it just a two-piece?
Well, no, we're a duo, yeah. So Jody and I are the band. We write all the music, we record everything. It's our baby. But when we play live, we hire like a full band because we've got a very big sound. We're like an indie rock and roll band. Rock and roll is our life.
I was listening to some of your stuff earlier, and it really, really reminded me of the Breeders. Was that like an intentional thing?
Oh, nice. No, but like I have to I actually don't really listen to them, so I feel like this is like the third time someone's been like, "You guys sound like the Breeders." I'm like, okay.
Oh, it's like I don't. I wouldn't. Like it just felt like the Breeders. I'm like, wow, this really, really reminds me of the Breeders, and I kind of always think of the Breeders as like not like a one, maybe 2 or 3 hit wonder. Like they were kind of like here and gone very quickly, but I always dug them.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll check them out because it's funny. I feel like a lot of people. What's really interesting about Jody and I with the way that we write, like, so just to finish your question though, like we do play. When we play live, we play with a full band. So we have like a bass player and a lead guitar player and sometimes we have a keyboard player. Jody plays drums. I play rhythm. Electric rhythm, and I sing. So but we write all the music together. It's our stuff and it's our little business. So and what was I gonna say? I was gonna mention something about the thing about in terms of like your reference point there with the Breeders. It's so interesting. When people talk to us about who we remind them of, and I feel like everything is always just like building on like what somebody else's taste is. So someone will just say, "Oh, you remind me of Nico Case," because my voice kind of sometimes sounds like that. Or, "Oh, you're like Blondie," because we're just kind of like take no shit. But I don't necessarily see it like tons of Blondie in our music. Yeah. Or like people say Hole because we're like we've got some grunge elements and we're female. So it's like, it's always interesting to see like what people's reference points are for our music because Jody and I bring such different influences into our music in terms of how we write and who we're inspired by. So, and it's interesting because we allow each other to just bring our natural influences. There's always going to be like it's interesting. Like I might take something from like Fleetwood Mac, like Tusk Fleetwood Mac, and she might take something from the Buzzcocks, and then we'll bring in some Arcade Fire and then some Lou Reed. And then that's what like we're inspired by while we're working on a song. But like she's got her influences and I've got mine. But because we give each other that permission to like have different influences, that it turns into something new. But then always someone it's so funny because then someone will say something about the song and it's like not at all the influences that we were using. But I think that's a good thing. I think it's good when people don't hear exactly what your influences are. It's almost like depending on how they feel.
And that's one of those things where we have a lot of music guests on, and I'm always trying to express to our listeners what they can expect from a band without being like, oh, are you rap or are you like country? Yeah. Because like those are meaningless now. Like there's
genre is pretty tough to like really pin anything down at
So I
this
usually
point.
ask like, oh, what band would make sense for you to go on tour with? Like what well-known band?
Right.
But like, yeah, in this case, I just heard them. I'm like, oh, there's like they're like the Breeders. Like that's maybe
Yes.
because I'm a Boston kid and Breeders are based out of Boston, and
Mhm.
so maybe that's the connection that I just immediately jumped to.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
So we were talking right before, and this is a question I almost never ask, but mise en scene.
There you go. Yeah.
Where'd that name come from? Because that's really pretty unusual. So I think I've only ever asked this question one time, and it's this band called Annika Scribbling.
Annika Scribbling. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
and he told me this story about this girl Annika who was driving, and she got into a car accident, like a head-on collision with another car, and they were like. Like the paramedics were there and they're like pulling her out of the car, and she'd like scribbled on a piece of paper, like because she was worried she wasn't going to make it, and it was like a note to her mother or something like that. And she's like, please, make sure my mother gets this. And the EMT's like, I can't. Your mother was in the other car and she didn't make it. And I'm like, oh my God. And then he goes, yeah, that's totally not true. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, that's not true.
God.
And I was just like, yeah, right. And I'm like, I'm never asking that question ever again. But hopefully you're not going to lie to me.
No, and I'm not going to like be reckless with your heart like that. No, okay. So mise en scene. All right. So a little bit of background is Jody and I met. I was working at a film festival. She was working at a museum, and we were in the same building. And we were both going to art school. So her and I would like meet up at lunch, and we talk about art and artists and, Andy Warhol and all that stuff. And then we got painting together. We started painting together and doing photography together. And like when we were painting together, like we were like sharing a canvas, which I think is a very difficult thing to do. I've never been able to do that with anybody else. We were able to like create like large scale pieces and paint together. And it was just, again, it was like, it's this permission, just for some reason, we just trust each other and we just allow each other to do whatever we're each inclined to do. And so eventually we started playing music, and it was awesome. Like, as soon as I started playing music, I was like, oh my God, it's just like sharing a canvas, same thing. And so because she was in another band and I had just started playing music, and we only had that summer together as friends, became best friends, and played music together, made art. And then I went away to a university in Halifax to study fine art, and she was in Manitoba. And then I eventually came back the next summer, and we were working on more music. And I was like, okay, well, we need a band name. And she's like, yeah, like, what are we going to call ourselves? And then so I made a list, like a 1-page list of like about 120 art terms because I'm like, well, we're born of art, right? Like, and that's like really what connects us, is just this ability to be really creative in every realm together. So I wrote down all these words, and she's like, mise en scene, that one. Yeah, let's do that. And I'm like, okay, sure. And that's our band name. So that's how it came to be.
So it's not, I've definitely heard it before, but I'm not familiar with it. So what does it mean?
Oh yeah. So mise en scene, what does it mean? Okay. So it's a French term, but it's actually the same in English and in French. So mise en scene in English, mise en scène in French. And it's a French term, but it's meant to, the translation is to put in the scene, to create the scene, to set up the scene, to put in the scene. So when you're a director looking through the lens of your camera, you're thinking about the mise en scene. Citizen Kane's like a perfect example of like the study of mise en scene in film. And so it's about like, the fireplace being so big, or if you're in theater, it's like where the actors are on stage and how do you set up the scene. So that's what the term means.
That's a really interesting name for a band. So like, do you think of like your music as like setting the scene for something?
I don't know. I would say like we definitely have cinematic tendencies, because I find that we're very dramatic in the way that our music is. In my opinion, like it's first and foremost like rock and roll, like indie rock music, but There's intensity to it. There's lots of energy to it. Like, I think the music and the lyrics really paint a picture. It really like goes there unapologetically and like looks you in the eye and shakes your hand kind of music. And so I would say that like we have a tendency to be like not dramatic in a bad way, but like dramatic and like acting and like, you know, just like going there and committing to the emotion and committing to the moment of the song.
Oh, that's cool. It's funny that you're talking about working on the same canvas. And it's definitely something that I would recommend if you have someone that like you're close to or that you really want to connect with. It didn't even occur to me that I have been doing that. When COVID kicked off, I kind of lost all interest in making anything. I was just, my creativity was out the window. And towards middle of the summer, a couple projects came up and I started working on them with my daughter. And that same thing, like we're like shoulder to shoulder working on the same project. And, you know, she was always like, "You're in my bubble," you know.
Oh, that's awesome. That must have bonded you.
Yeah. You know, yeah, it was so cool. Like, and it was really interesting just to, you know, like I really like to collaborate with people on stuff, but it was a really different experience to like work on the same thing at the same time with someone. So what did you guys like do oil paint or,
you know, it's really interesting because you have to force yourself. We're just doing acrylic and no, that's okay. We were just doing acrylic and but it's interesting because you have to like let go of control. You know, you can't tell somebody, "Oh no, you can't use that color," or, "Oh, I don't like that there." You know, if someone's like, you know, you have to trust that they've thought about it and that's where they think it should go.
Oh, you can't. You should talk to my daughter because she does. Her favorite
you're
thing.
Her dad, and you're gonna let her do whatever she wants.
Yeah, her favorite thing is like, "Your lines are super janky," and I'm like, "I'm not done yet. Let me finish."
Why, are you very basque or something?
No, I'm just more. I rough it in. Like I'm more like get it out of my head, rough it in, and then I'll go back and fine tune it.
Yeah.
And she's very much like as she goes, it has to be done and perfect. And the first piece.
Oh wow! Oh my god.
Yeah.
I'm more like you.
Yeah. So like the first thing we were doing, we a friend of mine had bought a house, and here in Massachusetts, it's illegal to sell a house that has a swimming pool with a diving board. So
what?
Yeah, because it's like a safety issue or whatever. So the previous owners had just taken the diving board off, and leaned it against the pool house. And so when my friends bought the house, they found the diving board, and they're like, "We don't really want a diving board." So they asked me to turn it into an art piece that they could hang out by the pool. And I'm like, "Can I have Zoe work on it with me?" And she's like, "Yeah, that'd be awesome." And so it's very like hard lines and very graphic. And so like I'm just roughing in the shapes, and she's like trying to make all the lines perfect on a very rough surface. I don't know, like next time you're on a diving board, think about trying to paint on it. It's meant not to be flat. So making like straight lines was kind of a pain in the ass. And so she was going very slow.
Yeah, it's funny because it's even, I also feel like in songwriting especially, I find like so I've done a lot of co-writing with people. I love co-writing. I think it's the same feeling for me, like sharing a canvas and all that. And some people though are just complete control freaks. Like they're such control freaks, and it has to be like their words. They don't want to share. And then part of me just like, why are you doing this then? Like you shouldn't be co-writing if this is like, if you're trying to like have like a death grip on like the song, and you know you're trying to like make it the most special, and you're the most important person in the room, and that's just not how you can write a song properly. You know, if you're gonna be in a room with people co-writing, you need to first of all realize that like the best line wins. Period. The song is king. It's always about the song. It's not about you. It's always about the song. And it's really obvious, like once you're all in the rhythm of like once you figure out where the song is going, what world it's in, what it's talking about, you know, pretty much immediately if someone says something and it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
you'll know if it's like, no, we can beat this line. Like, let's beat this line because you can tell there's something off about it. It's like a red dot it's like Austin, a blue dot and a red, it's like that. So it's like, you just know, like, you can just tell, like, if there's something that's kind of off. But some people are just like, no, I wrote that, so I want to keep it. And it's just kind of like, that's not how it goes. And it's also, it actually, to bring it back to sports, even, like, when you're sharing creatively, it's the same as when you're like on a team, like playing sports, passing a puck back and forth. Like, it's the same thing. It's all relative, in my opinion. Like, teamwork is all relative. And, whether it's whether you're on the ice or whether you're on a canvas or whether you're in a room writing a song, it's this volleying between however many people are in the room and like working together in this one motion and like trying to like move the wheels together. And if there's someone in there who's like, like just not caring, who's like barely skating hard to the bench to get off their shift, or who's just pouting in the corner because you're not using their line, like you can't work with that. You can't work with people like that. And that's kind of where it's also like this huge metaphor for life in terms of like how do we get along with each other and how do we work together. And that's why it's always just really disappointing when I see people who just can't do that, like,
and it's like a team that, like, I was never a big fan of like Mario Lemieux or like Eric Lindros because I felt they were just like, they would get this one guy and be like, okay, that's it. We're
just pass the puck to him kind of thing.
Get the puck to him and he's gonna score. Yeah. I like the scrappy guys. I love the defensive forwards that are like, my job isn't to score. My job is to prevent you from scoring, even though I'm, a center or a left wing or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. Or like when you feel like it's, every pass leading up to the goal was just poetry for it. Like, it's not just like someone taking it from like your end zone into the next one and then scoring. There's like a play, there's a setup, and everyone had to work together and be in the right place at the right time in order for that to happen. In the same way as it is for like playing live and singing harmonies and like sharing a canvas and doing all of that stuff. Like, it's that energy between people, and that's what I think is so important. Like, for me, like, the process of everything is way more enjoyable than the outcome. Like, sure, it's nice to win the game. Sure, it's nice to finish the recording and finish the canvas, but it's the process in which the event occurs that I think is where the magic really is. And that's why when people are like, oh, be present and all that stuff. That's why it sounds kind of corny, but it really is the journey. It's not the destination. Mm-hmm. And especially in the creative world, because I feel like that's where I'm most myself. Like, I actually don't care if I tour. I know I have to, and who knows when that's actually going to happen again. But because the touring is really difficult. It's a very hard thing to do. It's a very physically draining thing, different bed every night, and you're like working and you're socializing constantly at late hours, and it's a lot. It's really hard on your voice. It's really hard on the body and on the mental health. But for me, if I could just be like sitting in my house, writing songs and recording them and releasing them and just doing that for the rest of my life, I would be so happy.
So,
because the process of creation is just what I love.
So under that, do you not see the audience as part of the team? Because when you're touring, like,
oh no, of course I do. Of course I do. Like, definitely, of course I do. I just find that it's really hard it's just very physically difficult to tour. Like, I've just been noticing that aspect of it a lot. Like, it's always worth it at the end of the show. Like, you're always like at the show with the fans, all that stuff. It's fabulous. It's amazing. It's getting up the next morning after being asleep at around 3 a.m., mm-hmm. getting up at 8 a.m., and loading the car again with like all your heavy gear and then driving for 8 hours and not really sleeping. It's that part. And the unfortunate reality is,
but that's why you're the center, man.
Oh, you got me, Andy. You got me. I know, but that's why it's just
You
hard.
should have been a goalie or a drummer.
I know. Okay, it's so funny. Whenever I talk to Jody, because Jody's the drummer, and I'm like, if you ever played hockey, you'd obviously be the goalie. And she's like, why? And I'm like, just because you're the drummer. I don't know.
Because you're the most shit in front of you.
yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. No, but the fans are like the most important, the most important piece of the whole thing, really. Like, you want to make sure that you want your music to connect with people. Like, I remember when I first, like, we were all teenagers and we were all like, very emotional, and when we're all angsty, and I feel like that's when music really starts to hit,
Mm-hmm.
That's when music
Absolutely.
really starts to affect you. You're like, whoa, what is this? This is coming into my heart and soul, and it is never leaving. This is making me feel complete. This is making me feel that my feelings are validated because somebody else is singing the same thing that I'm feeling.
Yeah, it's like no one understands me except for Bret Michaels, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's like, so like for me, like when I was like angsty teenager and I'm like lying in bed looking at my ceiling trying to fall asleep, and I'm listening to Simon and Garfunkel on a Discman, and I'm like, oh my God, Paul Simon understands how I feel. And I'm like, wait a minute, if this guy is like, he's obviously a famous musician, famous songwriter, famous song I'm listening to. So if I feel a connection and this is a famous song, obviously other people are feeling that too. So that means that I'm not alone in what I'm feeling, because it's famous, because everybody loves it and everyone relates to it. So that's kind of like what I feel like the goal is, like in songwriting, is it's to tap into something so true and real and honest and genuine within yourself, but to master the craft so well that the way that you sing it, the way you write it, and the way you perform it, that same feeling of how it felt for you can be transcended into somebody else. That's crazy.
Have you had someone come up and say like, oh my God, you totally got me through something, or like I heard this and I felt like you understood me? Like, have you gotten that kind of feedback from somebody, like from a fan?
Yeah, and it's been like, and it's almost like, what? Like, you can't, like, you don't believe it, like I've seen like people like singing along to like every single word of every song, and I'm like, what? Because I'm just like, I don't know, I guess I'm just self-effacing in that way. So I'm just like, I don't know, it's weird. It's almost sometimes weird to like embrace sometimes like the really like positive, like incredibly overwhelming and like just wonderful things, the positive things that happen. And so yeah, I think I've had a few people actually come up and be like, this song is like everything to me, or like someone will like post online about it and like talk about how this is like, they love this song, or like, this is what got me through hard times or whatever. And I was like, wow, like that's awesome. Like, it's just amazing. And that's what kind of like keeps you going, because, you want to like, on the one hand, you want to like keep writing and keep giving people that kind of stuff, because I feel like music is also, for me as a musician, as much as it's like, I can't not write, like I actually can't not write. I can't not write poetry. I can't not write music. So like, even if this were to all end tomorrow, I would still be writing songs, even if I never recorded them. That's just what I'm going to do. I just know that. Just like someone who will always like, I'll always carry a book that I'm going to write in. Someone will always carry a sketchbook that they'll sketch in. Right. So it's just like, it's just who you are. So I'll always do that. And I've lost my train of thought. So what was I talking about? I was just thinking about my sketchbook for a second, and all of a sudden I'm like, where is that old sketchbook?
I was literally like, I'm pretty sure mine is like right there.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's just something that you'll always do, and it's and you just hope that you can like keep giving to people, because I guess that's what it is. The other half of it for me. So it's like the fact that I'm always going to write. It's just who I am. It's always going to be with me, no matter what. And then the other half of it is like, you're almost trying to like give back in a weird way with music, because, okay, so that Simon Garfunkel song hit me so hard that I want to return the favor to someone else, like pay it forward, so to speak.
Nice.
So I don't know if that's how you guys feel like, or how you feel like with like art, because art can give like art gives me so much life. I just don't
I
have
always
that. I'm not as good of a I'm not as good at paying that forward as I am with music.
yeah, I always find it weird when I run into someone and they know who I am. And it's, you know, I don't know. I don't think podcasting is necessarily an art, but it's kind of been my focus lately. And you just, it's a weird feeling. Like when people you don't know you.
Yeah.
And we were, you know, living in Plymouth, Mass. The Thanksgiving Day parade, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And we just call it Parade Day. And I was there with my kids one year. And you know, we were just talking, hanging out, and someone's like, excuse me, you know, I don't want to, you know, interrupt. He's like, but I just wanted to say I'm like a big fan. I'm like, what? And he's like, I'm a big fan. I'm following you online and blah, blah. And, you know, I want to come to some of your events. And I'm like, what? Like it wouldn't register. And then finally I'm like, thanks, man. Like, that's cool. And like, then he kind of went on his way and I turned to my kids. I'm like, you guys saw that happened, right? Like that was real.
Yeah. That's an amazing feeling though. It feels awesome to be like, you know, to be validated, you know, in that respect, because you work so hard and you put your passion into what you're like, your time and your energy and your effort into the stuff that you love to do. And it always feels so good when someone, you know, recognizes the good stuff you're doing.
You know, I just find it strange because it's like, I'm super selfish. I do this for me. I do it because I enjoy it. I don't really think about, you know, of course I want listeners, but I don't really think about like, oh, how is this going to affect someone's day? Or, you know, is this particular podcast going to change someone's life? I'm like, I get to talk to cool people. And
yeah,
then, you know, like even yesterday I was having dinner with a friend and like my phone went off and I looked and it was someone who had like listened to one of our other podcasts. And he's like, oh my God, this guest was awesome. He's like, you got to have him back on. I'm like, oh yeah. That was like, 2 months ago. Like I kind of forgot about it.
yeah.
So it's just weird that kind of thing happens.
Well, it's funny, that actually kind of happens for us too a little bit, because so, you know, it's so funny because when you're living the life, so like we have a new record coming out on October 9th. And but okay, so we've been releasing singles, and obviously COVID screwed everything up. You know, we were supposed to release this album in June and now it's coming out in October. And then we put out more singles because like no one knows what's going on.
Everyone I talked to is like, this was going to be the year.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It really was going to be that. And I hope it still is for us in that respect. Hopefully like just pushing it back a little bit now that everything's a little bit, it's a weird new normal now. Not saying that everything's under control by any means, but it's like people are kind of living with it a little bit more. Whereas when we wanted to release it, it was still such a new thing that was going on that, you know, it wasn't gonna make any kind of effect on anything. It was like it's so unimportant where everyone's dealing with a worldwide pandemic, right? So anyway, but in terms of like you're talking about you know, episodes from 2 months ago, and someone's like, I love that episode, and you're like, oh, I did that like 2 months ago. What? It's the same kind of thing with us, because you know, I wrote these songs like a year and a half ago, and then we demoed them, and then we recorded them, and then we had to mix and master them, and then we have to get everything ready, and then we had to start promoting them. So it takes like a really long time before you're putting things out. So we're putting this record out on October 9th, and I'm so excited. I can't wait for the world to hear it, because they're going to be hearing it for the first time. But I've been hearing this stuff for like, oh my God, like, and the amount of times you have to listen to the song when you're like mixing and when you're mixing it. Oh, put the kick drum higher. I want the kick pedal sound. I want the kick higher. I want the snare lower. Oh, can we put this effect on the voice? I want the voice lower, this harmony higher. Like, you're just dealing with all the levels, and you're literally listening to the same song, and you're listening so intensely on different things. You're listening to it on your phone, you're listening to it on your computer, you're listening to it in your car, you're listening to it on your stereo, and you're finding all these little things that are sticking out, and you're just so inside the song, and you're just trying to mold it and shape it a little bit more to like whatever makes your ears feel happy. And you know, so I've listened to every single song like 100 and 300 times or something like that by the time that the song at record's coming out.
Does it ever
get
to
so
that?
It's kind of old.
Does it ever get to that point where, like, you know how if, like, you say a word enough, it just sounds like gibberish? Does it ever, like, that point where you're like, I can't even, like, this doesn't even sound like a song anymore. It's just like, I can only hear the bass drum, or, like, it kind of starts to lose that tangible
totally
thing.
Or, like, you'll always, like, hear something. There's always going to be, like, a word that I'm like, I just don't know if I like how I sound on that word, but I got outvoted on that. But so whenever I hear that song and I hear that line or hear that word, I'm like, like, I'll still hear it.
Yeah.
Whereas nobody else fucking cares. Like, no one else notices. And,
Right.
but it's funny, there was a time actually in the studio, where my producer was like, what was it? What was the song? I can't remember what it. I have to remember it. He was like, he stopped it. He's like, Stef, this sounds too Canadian.
Sounds too
He's
Canadian.
like, the way you're singing is so Canadian. You need to, like, change that accent on this. I think it was.
Do you apologize in the song?
No. Sorry. Sorry. I actually do say I'm sorry at one point in one of the songs, but I didn't say it. I don't think. Oh, maybe it was that. Oh my god.
Oh, shut up! Really?
Was.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. Okay, it's a song called "Love and War," and he stopped. He's like, "You need to really pronounce that O," and I'm like. He's like, it sounds. He's like, listen, nothing wrong with sounding Canadian. He's like, well, that's really Canadian. I'm north of Fargo, like we're rural. Like,
oh, you betcha.
Yeah. Oh, you betcha. Oh, for sure. Like, that's where I'm from. So, get me a bunch of beers in me, and I'm gonna sound very that.
Yeah.
So it's. It's
yeah,
so
when
funny.
I'm drunk, my I don't really have a Boston accent, but when it comes out, it's because I'm usually drunk.
Yeah, exactly. It's same with me. So I get the Fargo accent, or what I don't know what you'd call that. We call it a prairie accent. So yeah, it's funny. He had to be like, you can't say it like sorry. You have to say like so. You can't say with an no. Don't say with an O. He's like, don't say sorry. It's sorry, because Americans are more sorry, like with an A, whereas we're more O, which is so weird. It was
so
weird.
then you just trying to make it sound right, and none of it sounds right.
Yeah, none of it sounded right. It felt so weird, like going over and over. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Like, I don't even know what I'm singing at all anymore. And I'm like, is that right? And I tried to do something a little bit in between. I didn't want to go super far into the sorry, because that's like also super like American accent.
Yeah.
And then sorry is very Canadian accent. So I'm like, how can I do it in between? So it just sounds like a normal person.
It's so funny.
Took a couple takes.
I always think it's interesting, like when you hear like, a French band or, a non-English speaking band sing. And when they sing, they sound like they have like a perfect American accent.
Yeah.
It just seems so strange.
I'm always amazed by the Brits with that, though.
Yeah, they do that a lot too.
Yeah, the British, like, they'll have these thick accents. Like, Spice Girls, for me, like, I couldn't believe they were British when I found out when I was, like, a super fan back in the day. And, like, they're so British, but they sing like they're totally American. Right. Whereas, like, Mick Jagger sounds like a British guy.
Right.
Because he's just like all over the
I was thinking of Steve King from the Flogging Mollies. I'm like, there's no question of where that guy's from when he sings.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. I actually love listening to bands who like don't speak English at all sing English songs in English, because I find the accent and the way that they will say, R's or T's or S's or whatever. I think it's so endearing. I just think it's like the cutest, like, I'm not trying to like downplay it, or, be, what's the word? Whatever. I'm not trying to judge them in any negative way. I think it's just so interesting to listen to it in that way, because it just adds that little bit more of a mystery to me.
Yeah, I can't comment on how anyone speaks. Being from Massachusetts, we mispronounce everything. We can't even get our own towns right,
Well, yeah, I haven't actually no, I've been to Boston before. My friend lived there, and that was I loved it though. I loved the energy there. It felt very familiar, because Winnipeg is very edgy. It's salt of the earth people, but
Mhm.
don't fuck with them, and everything will be just fine. They're awesome until they're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Boston is
yeah,
this weird, like, small big city where it's a big city,
yeah,
but it doesn't like it doesn't feel like it. It feels kind of homey, but it's definitely everybody's your buddy right up until they're not,
yeah,
you
exactly,
know?
exactly. And then you're in hot soup, and you don't want to be dealing with that, and you regret getting to that point, and
Yeah.
yeah, you don't want to do that.
But that's one
But
of my
they're the
favorite.
people you would take to war with you, though. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, and it's one of my favorite things about living in Plymouth is it is a nice suburb of Boston. We're only about 45 minutes away by car,
Hmm.
and uh, it got a real Boston feel to it because it's a tourist area. So
Hmm.
there's lots of things to do. Not like a regular suburb that there's a Walmart and two places to
It's got
eat.
all the stuff you need. It's got like the basics.
Well, it's got a lot more. Like, I mean, this town there's like 40 restaurants on like two of the main
Oh,
streets, and there's an art museum, and there's a performing arts
oh,
center, and
that's so nice.
because it's a tourist town, and it's very arts and music heavy, so it's like you took a little chunk of Boston off and stuck it in the suburbs, and it's
Oh,
it's
that's
just a
awesome.
really pleasant place to live.
So, where do you play music in Plymouth?
Well, they play everywhere. So there are, like I said, there's Water Street, which is where the Mayflower and Plymouth Rock are. And then
Okay,
one
nice.
block up, there's Main/Court Street. It changes names halfway for some stupid reason.
Oh,
And
okay.
that is like tourist central. So on those two streets, there's conservatively 40 bars and restaurants.
Nice.
And I'd say more than half have music. And this is when things are normal right now. Everything's still kind of trying to be figured out.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
they have music 3 nights a week, generally, some every night. Um, there's a brewery in town, Mayflower Brewery. Shout out to them. Wearing their hat. Love those guys.
Nice. Oh, nice.
Um, and they have music there all the time. It's a lot of it is cover bands because it's just the kind of atmosphere that people are looking for. But we have a really,
Mm.
really strong group of original acts that are just really doing some great stuff. And we have Plymouth Memorial Hall that Bob Dylan played in the 60s,
Oh, nice.
and his son played there last year with the
Oh,
Wildflowers.
oh, I love the wallflowers.
And
I love them.
Art Garfunkel's played there,
Oh,
and
sweet.
Sarah McLachlan played there. So they've gotten some really top
Oh,
notch.
right on. That's
And
awesome.
then just a few blocks down, there's a performing arts center that's doing some phenomenal stuff. And it's a really cool hip town that's something's always going on, and it's not even always music. Like the Memorial Hall has like UFC type
Oh,
fighting,
yeah.
if that's your
Oh,
thing.
cool.
We don't have a hockey team, unfortunately. We have a baseball team.
Oh,
So
that's
there's
good.
sports stuff if you like sports stuff.
Yeah.
uh so you were talking about being on tour and not necessarily being your favorite thing, but where have you been? Where were you on tour when COVID happened?
No, thank God. Oh my gosh, I've had a few friends who were on tour during that, and oh, just brutal day to stop and turn around. I just felt so bad for them. That is a big buzzkill. Um, yeah, so we've toured. Oh man, we've toured all over the place. Seriously, a lot of the states. We've been to South by Southwest a bunch of
Oh,
times.
nice.
Yeah, we went to Australia, played a festival called Big Sound there. We've toured Germany a bunch, played a bunch of festivals there as well. Paris, the UK. We played Liverpool Sound City. We were in Barcelona. We played Primavera Sound, which is like the Coachella of Europe, and that was an amazing, amazing experience. Um, and we played like obviously all over Canada, but all those days are gone. So
They'll come
they're
back,
just
man.
memories now.
Yeah, they'll
Yeah,
come back.
it's interesting though, because like you mentioned earlier when we were talking about when you're painting with your daughter.
Mhm.
Have you been very creative during COVID?
No, not up
Because I
until recently.
haven't.
No.
Yeah, I have not. Like I every time. So this is so frustrating. So I'm like, I've got all this time. There's nothing to do, And of course, like, we're getting ready for an album release. So, like, you know, we're getting like visual content happening. We're trying to do as much as we possibly can with all these restrictions. But I'm like, you know, this should be a great time to sit down and write. And I've got nothing going on upstairs. Like, I pick up the guitar and I'm like, what am I doing with this? You know, like, I don't know what this is.
I can relate 100%. Initially, I got furloughed from my day job and ended up getting laid off. And I think for the first month and a half of COVID, time stopped having any meaning. Like, I just would sleep at weird times. I told people, I'm like, I haven't had, my favorite thing was to tell people, I'm like, I haven't eaten breakfast, lunch, or dinner in like 2 weeks. And they'd be like, oh my God. I'm like, I just have meal because it's weird times. And I'm like,
I just have meal.
I'm like, I don't know what I should be eating, but it's like 3 a.m. and I'm having pizza. It might be my breakfast because I didn't sleep until like 6 hours later. Like, I don't even know anymore.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And it was just like an endless string of Netflix and
Tiger
nothing.
King.
Yeah, Tiger King. Yeah. But like my attention span was gone too. Like, I found myself watching more YouTube because I felt like if it went more than 15 minutes, I couldn't pay attention anymore.
Oh, that is so interesting. Like, I think this is going to be it's going to be really interesting to see what artists of all kinds are going to be producing in the next 5 years. You know, what kind of content and what are people going to be commenting on? What kind of, like, what emotions are we going to be talking about, and how are they going to be manifested? Because this is like the first time in a really long time, at least this is the first time for me in my generation, where it feels like things aren't safe, you know, like your foundation of security has been shook. So with that happening, of course you're finding, and myself included, like, of course we're all finding it hard to create right now because we're just unsure. We feel unsafe in a really fundamental way that we've never really felt before. And so, and normally, like, so I've just realized that I'm like, okay, I'm in input mode right now. Like, I have like ebbs and flows, and my creativity comes in waves. So I know when I'm like, I have to live, and then I can reflect and write on it. So right now I'm in that living stage / input stage where I'm just taking things in, and then eventually it'll get full, and then it'll just all flow out, and then I'm in output mode and I'm just constantly creating. But right now I am in a serious input mode, and it doesn't look like it's going to be changing anytime soon because I just don't have, I don't know, a part of me is also kind of like, what do I have to say right now that's important? Like, I just don't have that inspiration I just don't know what I want to talk about. You know, I don't know what I want to write about because I'm just still kind of in shock, I think, a little bit. Like, I can't even really describe my own emotions on how I'm feeling about things.
Yeah, I feel
I don't know how I could write them, you know?
I feel like we're in for a lot of dark music.
Yeah. Well, and that's so funny that, like, our record coming out is the complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
I had an interview the other day where they were asking about, you know, like, in these times, you know, like, how do you feel about, like, your music, and like, where do you think it fits with, like, what's happening in the world right now? I'm like, well, obviously I wrote this when COVID wasn't a thing. So, you know, definitely wasn't thinking about that. And we don't really write depressing music. Usually we write very, like, energetic, upbeat, kind of fun rock and roll kind of stuff. And so I'm like, that's what the record is. So it's kind of like, well, I hope that this record brings people out of that space for a period of time, you know, at least, or if that's, go for a run or listen to it and dance in your kitchen while you're cooking, and just like, hopefully it's an escape for people. Because it's definitely not like indulge in the misery. It's definitely not that vibe. Maybe the next record will be, though, who knows? Because it'll be interesting to see, like, how this starts to affect the way that we, you know,
I wonder if we're gonna have, like, a lapse in, like, traditional love song, because it's like, you being a single person, like, you can't go out and meet someone, like, you can't have that weird spark where you're like, oh, we met in the grocery store and blah blah blah, you know, like, whatever.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm not a mute. You if you want to take that line, you can use that line.
I'll let you know. I'll give you some royalties for it.
Sweet. But don't make it sound too Canadian, all right?
Okay,
Sorry.
sorry.
But yeah, I just wonder if that's going to be like a side effect, because like single life is super weird. And,
Yeah.
I was talking to
Yeah.
someone the other day and they're like, oh, met this new guy. I'm like, how? I'm like,
Yeah.
other
How?
than like apps and the horror of dating online, I'm like, that's just not a thing. Like, I wonder if that's going to, or if we're going to get more breakup songs because people are sick and tired of each other.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple, and there's also some interesting stats that are going around too with the whole COVID thing. Apparently, like to add to go off of what you're talking about, like apparently Tinder's just off the chains. Like never been more users on Tinder than during COVID. I think because people are so bored, they need to just send dick pics and stuff. They need to get it out there. The world needs to see this.
Someone needs to look at this right now.
Yeah, exactly. Someone needs to see this. So there's that, but then there's also apparently like tons of breakups. I know so many people who've broken up over COVID because they just couldn't be with their partner for that long, like during all of this.
So intensely, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Like, yeah, it's definitely an interesting. It either will make you stronger or it will, illuminate the differences so much that you can't really,
and it's so
come back.
It's so unfair to those couples because it's such a weird, high pressure, low activity.
Oh yeah.
And there's no escaping.
Yeah.
You can't be like, well, I'm gonna go hang out with my buddies for a while. You're like, well,
yeah.
Well, it's just you.
Exactly. And you have kids, and like that must be super hard too. And how do you be creative while you're like taking care of your kids, but you're like around them all the time, and you're like, oh my God, I love you, but oh my God.
Well,
like,
see, I had the exact opposite because I'm a divorced dad. So
okay, so you got time.
Well, from
February
February to June, I didn't see my kids, which was like devastating, and that just made the whole situation even worse.
Oh my gosh!
So just we still talked and text and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but it's just not the same, and
wow.
they really, I've had friends, people have ups and downs in life in general, and they, I'll be down one day and I'll be up the next, and they'll be like, oh, what happened? I'm like, oh, I got to hang out with my kids. Like, they really revitalize my energy, and
oh, that's so good.
It helps. They're super cool kids.
Yeah,
I can say that. Cool, I can say that because only one of them listens to this. So
only one. How many kids do you have?
Just two. And I mean,
so 50%. You're working at a 50%.
Technically, I have one kid and one adult. My son just turned 18. So.
Oh wow, an adult.
Yeah, it's crazy. Child. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, birthday, I'm like,
Christmas is over.
Yeah, exactly. Buy your own gifts.
Yeah.
Fill your own stockings this year. Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens because, yeah, like, so we're in terms of music, because like that's really my realm. That's what I can speak to. I'm seeing all of the music that's coming out, and it's not yet totally affected by COVID yet in terms of the content. Have you noticed in like art? Because I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm being naive here, but it feels like maybe if someone's inspired during these times and they paint something, they can usually kind of turn it around a lot quicker than like a single, let's say, which would be done usually about a year beforehand. So have you seen any kind of like COVID inspired work recently?
Definitely. And a lot of it's happening in weird, like, I'm seeing a big boom in like public art where there's, because things around here, I don't know exactly what's going on in Winnipeg, but like around here, things are starting to open up. People are trying to get back to as normal as they can be, but there's all sorts of additional things. Like a lot of places are doing outside dining where they normally didn't. So they have to put like the cement Jersey barriers along the side of the road. So they're commissioning artists to paint those. My buddy who owns the Speedwell Tavern, Jordan Chabot, shout out to Jordan, had to put dividers in between the booths in his restaurant so he could use them all. And so they're like they go from the back of the booth all the way to the ceiling, and he's commissioned artists to come in and paint those. And there's a
Cool.
real like fuck COVID mentality that seems to be popping up on them.
Awesome.
Like
I love that.
He did one that's kind of like a space scene, and there's like COVID floating through it, and someone shooting it with a ray gun, and so there's kind of like a lot of let's make this shitty world that we're living in look as good as we can for right now.
Yeah.
And even like the music scene, like people are starting to do things again. There's like some outdoor socially distant concerts that I've been to, and they're super weird, but
yes, they are kind of weird. But
everyone's just like, this is weird, but it's live music, and thank God,
I know it's definitely. I think this is I really hope that people are, really realizing that. I guess it's a privilege to see live music, and to be out and to be together and to not have to worry about our safety. That's, who would have thought that was something we would ever have to be so thankful for and so lucky to have had, and like how right now we don't fully have that. And I really hope that people realize how important the arts are, because I feel like the arts are going to be taking a huge hit. Like I know the music industry is already taking a huge hit, like massive hit. And because venues and promoters and bands, agents, like this is all the live side of it, and that is a huge industry, and it is hugely affected right now. And it's just I just hope that people, like want it back and are like willing to support it by, showing up and by like paying the ticket price, because, during COVID, it's been very difficult for all these people to like, stay open, maintain their businesses, write music, even play music. So it's just,
it's a tricky time. And I mean, it's going to look different in some aspects, but it's going to come back. And like, I know people be like, oh, hugs are gone forever. And I'd be like, there was like the bubonic plague and like the Spanish flu. Like this has happened before and we still hug each other. It will come back, and some people, I definitely think there'll be some people that have lifelong, mental issues, whether it be agoraphobia or germophobia or whatever. Sure. But, as society, we'll come back. And I think
we will.
A lot of it is human beings are too lazy to uphold rules and regulations that prevent them from doing things that they want to do. Eventually, we'll just break down and do it anyways.
Yeah, I'm sure we're all seeing moments, like glimpses of that even already, at least. Like,
oh, I've had those moments where like I've done something and I walk away and be like, that was really stupid. Like I shouldn't have done that.
Like, why did I do that? Like,
Well, I definitely got the COVID.
Yeah, I definitely got the COVID. I don't know if this happened to you, but when I was like during our like, stay inside times, when I was watching Netflix and people were like shaking hands and hugging, I was like, oh my God, you can't do that. I was like talking to this kid like, oh my God, no, like you can't do that. Like, it's funny. And now it's like, we'll see how this kind of turns out. But I don't know. I feel like Canada's been doing a pretty good job, has been actually doing a really great job. We have very low numbers. We've taken it very seriously, which is really great. And, but yeah, it's definitely hanging around though. And like now with like September rolling around, we're in September, it's like flu season. And now like, I don't know what it is for you guys, but for us up here, it's like, everyone's like, oh fuck, here we go with flu season. Like now if you cough, like from pollen, from seasons changing, you're going to get like a look, like you have to be really careful.
You mentioned Austin being a dot of blue in a sea of red. The one big knock on Plymouth is it is a dot of red in a sea of blue.
Interesting.
So I'd say, and this is one of the misleading things, is there's a lot of talk about how divisive the United States is, and it is, but it's not in half. Mr. Trump did not win the popular election, and the majority of people in the country are Democrats or undecided. so it's definitely not an in half. It's just the media, the way that the media and social media and stuff are set up. They both sound equal, and they're not. But
Mm-hmm.
in Plymouth, it might be 50-50, but it is definitely a conservative area, which is strange to have such like a strong art and music scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
because like all the centers that you guys have,
it's weird, but it's just kind of how it shook out. So it can be a little weird around here. Like sometimes, I've had friends who got yelled at because they're like, dude, you got to put a mask on to be in here. And there's been people arrested for spitting on people or coughing on people intentionally. Yeah,
oh my god,
and
that's so irrational.
yeah,
Oh
and it's
my
like this all
god.
it's a conspiracy, and it's just like, shut up and put your mask on,
Oh
man.
my
Like,
god.
so
Oh my god.
it's a very tricky
Oh my god.
situation sometimes, but
Yeah.
like I said, I mean, people, it'll come around, and things are
Yeah.
getting normal-ish. But I think the winter months are really going to be interesting because the outdoor dining isn't going to be what it was, obviously, and the outdoor concerts are
Yeah.
going to have to go away. So I think we're going to see a lot more
Right.
the live streams and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Do you guys are your restaurants open?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, are they working at full capacity, or how is that
No, no,
working for you guys?
no. So they can work at whatever capacity they can be at, as long as the tables are 6 feet apart from
Okay.
the back of chairs, not from the table itself.
Oh, I see.
Um,
Okay.
all the employees have to wear masks. You have to wear a mask if you leave your seat, but while you're sitting at your seat, you can take your mask off to eat. There were some, and it's only restaurants, like bars aren't allowed to be open. So if you don't serve food, you can't be open.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Oh, that I actually saw a news segment in Ireland. It's that way too.
Yeah.
And like
So
the oldest pub in Ireland, one of the oldest pubs in Ireland is closing down because they don't serve food. And they're like, what the fuck?
yeah. So there's a lot of places that are trying to, to their defense, they're trying to keep their business open and running, and so they'll try to be like, oh well, we have chips, or we bought a hot dog machine or whatever.
Right.
And some places are just flat out just ignoring the law and doing what they want. And so then the governor came out and amended the initial rules, so you cannot order an alcoholic beverage without ordering food first.
Wow.
And
Huh.
so you can't, and I think what they're trying to do is keep the nightlife from happening, because they're like, that's when everyone gets drunk, and that's when things are going to spread.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can't really
And that's
go
when people forget that we're living in COVID times.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you can't go bar hopping anymore, which is a huge thing down here.
Okay.
You meet friends at one place and you just work your way down the street, and within 3 blocks you're hammered.
Yeah.
But
That sounds like a good time. That sounds like
so
a pub crawl.
it's so much fun. Yeah, don't hit them all. You'll go to the emergency
You won't
room.
make it.
Yeah. It's a fun town to live in, but like right now it's weird, and people are trying to make the best of it, and they're starting to book solo musicians in restaurants. The place I went last night, there was Mike McHugh was playing, great local cover guy, and so it's starting to feel a little normal, but it's still weird.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird here too. And our restaurants are kind of the same, like either 50% capacity, but they definitely have to have like the 6 feet distant thing, and yeah, masks, all that stuff. So it's very similar there. We have some like outdoor stuff happening. But yeah, it's just really hard because it's also like you want to make sure that you're being taken care of as a musician, like that I'm going to be in a safe space. But then you're also, the other thing too that's really tough is like you also want to make sure that you're getting paid fairly for what you're doing. And it's tough for restaurants who are pretty much operating at 50% capacity
to pay the same of what they were paying beforehand, right?
Yeah, like if I'm normally playing a 300 person venue and now only 100 people can go into the venue, and that was not like everyone has a job right now too, or some people are struggling because of like all the time off of work back in the late spring. So it's like, well, they might not have the ability to like pay a decent ticket or a regular ticket price, so it's, or they can't buy a merch or whatever. Right. So it's just been a nightmare in terms of like how it's trickled down to absolutely everything.
And that's been,
and
like,
I can't write a song.
and that's been like our thing here is like, after the governor came out with that announcement, we actually had planned some events that we had to cancel because I'm like, I don't even understand. Yeah. So we're charging you a ticket price, and then when you show up, oh, do you want to drink? Now you have to order food if you want to drink.
Yeah.
So it just becomes so complicated, and we are selling. We pretty much everyone down here, if they're running an event like that, if there's 6 people that sit at that table, you have to pay. You basically buy a table's worth of tickets. You can't get like a ticket. So basically you sit with the people that you come with, and so it can be really, excluding because you're like, well, there's only 2 of us and we want to go see this, and the only tables are 6 people, and so
that's brutal.
It's weird, and but listen, it's gonna come back. I'm positive.
It'll come back. It's just going to take some time. And in the meantime, hopefully you and I both get inspired again and we can make some dynamite work.
Well, I'm telling you, definitely working with my daughter has kind of like picked me up a lot. That's been huge.
Good.
So, and now that things are kind of starting to open up a little bit, we are starting to plan some local events, which is just a godsend. Good. It just keeps me busy.
But like you said, the winter's going to be interesting. Winter's coming. Very Game of Thrones-y. It's very Game of Thrones-y right now. Oh,
Jesus. If walkers show up, I quit. That's it. I'm done. That's it.
If the zombie apocalypse finally happens, or those
I feel like if the zombie apocalypse happened now, there would be 2 responses here in the United States. One would be, I don't believe it, those aren't really zombies. And the other would be like, yeah, it fucking figures.
Yeah, I'll join them. I am one now.
Yeah,
I'll just be one.
Yeah, that's way easier. Can I go out if I'm? Yeah.
That's way easier than this shit.
Do you think we're? Because like I hear a lot of people like, oh, I'm starting to plan for next year touring, and it seems like festivals are. I don't know if they're like. I don't know if the people we talk to are the festival type of bands that tend to play festivals, or it just seems like there's more and more festivals. Do you think we're going to see them come back soon, or do you think those are like years away?
I honestly don't know. It obviously depends on the kind of festival. If you're like an indoor festival, I think that's going to be very difficult. Mm-hmm. I saw that a friend of mine who's in a band is doing a live performance taping for a festival. So like it's coming up, the festival's happening like soon. Mm-hmm. And they recorded a performance, and then I think they're sending it to the festival, and then it's presented live on their website. So that's something that's happening with that I thought was interesting. And then if you're an indoor festival, I don't know, like, so we were supposed to go to South by again this year. Obviously it got canceled. We were supposed to go to Treefort Music Festival in Boise, Idaho. That was canceled. So I don't know if, and that has the Boise Festival has indoor and outdoor. Same with South by. But have you ever been to South by?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, you'll understand why it was canceled. Like we're talking like 60,000 people in the streets. Like It is so packed. It is crazy. Like there's no way that South by could have there's no way that could have happened. So it'll be, I don't know if places like that will be able to come back, but you know how like a lot of folk festivals have like a bunch of outdoor venues, outdoor stages, and they're like kind of out in the country somewhere. I feel like those might have a chance of being able to come back. Like because you're allowed to camp, like camping went up huge, I think, like right in the summer because no one can really travel.
No one wants to go to a hotel.
Yeah, but it's crazy. Like, so like our borders are between each other are closed. Like I couldn't drive down and visit you if I tried. Like, So our borders are closed, and there are still like within Canada. I don't know what it's like in the States, but in Canada, there's still border and like quarantine. You have to quarantine between certain borders of provinces.
Yeah. There's states that were like, if you come to Massachusetts, you need to quarantine for 2 weeks, or we're going to fine you $500.
Oh wow! Like no matter where you're from.
It depends on which state, and
Okay,
that
that's the
list
same with us.
is very small.
Wow.
And doesn't include like Rhode Island is like right next to us and probably one of the busiest back and forth between the two. And they're not on the list, man. Like,
Interesting. Yeah. So like for us, like our north is very vulnerable. So like the Yukon and Nunavut, which is like north, like beside Alaska north. And that stuff, like those provinces are super, super vulnerable because they have very small populations and very small resources.
you're right.
So those are straight up closed. Like you're not allowed to ever go there unless you work up there, if you work in mines and stuff like that. Or if you're a teacher or a doctor, like there's no reason why you'd be going up there. You cannot visit for fun, like no way, no chance. And I don't know when that's going to open up, because for them, like we're talking really small populations, and you know,
it wouldn't take a lot for it to run through the
doesn't
population.
take, yeah. And like they don't have, like I think some of the places have like 5 respirators for the whole province, and it's
Oof.
tiny. Like,
Yeah.
so if something happens, like it's so easy to wipe out that whole province, which is like really scary to think. But then there's other provinces that are doing just fine, but there's still quarantine on them to go. Like if you go to another province, you're still having to quarantine, even though like our numbers are really, really low or something. So it's interesting. It's all just like the politics of the West and the East in Canada, and like, you know, Western Canada is open to each other, but not the East. And yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, like how like they're deciding all these things.
It is weird, and it bothers me that there's not like one cohesive, like let's all do the same thing. But in Massachusetts, our numbers have been relatively really good. And so I think the governor is just like, I'm not taking any crap. Don't come here. Like, yes, we will love your tourist money some other time, but not this year.
Yeah.
And it's just been, you know, no judgment, just stay where you are.
Yeah, exactly. It's just kind of, that's the easiest way to kind of contain it, because it's just the spreading that makes it so crazy. And actually, I watched Contagion at the beginning.
Why did you do that?
I don't know. I watched it with my sister, who's a doctor, and we were like, we were texting the whole time. I'm like, oh my God, is this what COVID is? She's like, yes. Oh my God, we're fucked.
Oh my God, that's like the worst thing to watch.
Oh my God, I know, but apparently, like that's the most accurate thing to watch in terms of like how this thing happened, how it spread, and how, like, you know, like how this stuff happens. And like the thing is that it's going to continue to happen, you know, like I think, was it Bill Gates that was saying something like the next big issue that we're going to be dealing with isn't going to be like World War III. It's going to be pandemics and viruses. That's going to be our biggest enemy moving forward. So he was right, of course. And here we are. So it's going to be interesting to see just how we like land on our feet and how we move forward. But I just hope that people still find ways to support. I hope people like keep supporting the arts and keep supporting musicians and artists, and that we can just find a way to keep doing this, because, you know, I know for some people this is like, okay, this is my cue to bow out, you know?
Yeah.
And I really just don't want to see, you know, the world lose all these great artists that we need in this world, because it's just too financially difficult to continue, you know?
Well, on that note, where can our listeners go to support you and hear your stuff?
Oh, well.
Nice segue, right?
That's a great segue. Like, wow. Like, we just had that great momentum there. That was great. That was like
and I derailed it by calling it out. Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. So yeah, you can find us on all the DSPs, on Spotify and Apple Music and all that stuff. And you can go find us on Facebook. And our website is misensceneband.com. And then our Instagram handle and TikTok and all that stuff is Mise en Scene Band. Facebook, Mise en Scene Band. YouTube, you can find us there. So just honestly, like liking us, following us is like a huge support for us right now. And then once the record's out, buy it.
Are you
We're
guys
gonna have some really cool merch, so I'm excited about it.
Are you guys on Bandcamp?
Not right now, but we will be doing our merch on Bandcamp when that's all set and ready to go soon.
They've really piqued my interest because it sounds like they're really doing some cool stuff to support the artists.
Yeah, they've been doing really, really great things, like where they don't take commission on certain Fridays and stuff like that, and that's huge. So that's a big win, and that's a really, really awesome incentive for musicians. If you're a musician listening to this and you want to, you want to sell your music or sell merch and stuff online, Bandcamp is definitely the place to go. They're definitely very artist friendly, and everyone I know is on that. So yeah, all of our merch and stuff will be on Bandcamp when it's ready to go, and you can find everything on our website as well.
Awesome. And I got plenty of time on my hands now, so I'll start planning the Plymouth Music Festival in 2022 or something. And
yes, and we're coming.
Sweet. Yeah, nice. I'm gonna hold you to that.
Yeah.
I don't know where the hell it's going to happen. Maybe we'll do it at Plymouth Plantation. That would be crazy.
That would be cool.
Everyone could dress as pilgrims.
Oh, that'd be so fun.
So to our listeners, thank you for listening, and hope this was as much fun as it was for me, and we will see you guys again next week. Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art, except for Instagram, we're at Inebri-art6. You can email us with your questions, complaints, and whatnot at Inebri-art@yahoo.com. And if you're looking for more podcasts, you can check out the other podcasts on our network, Retro Redoctopus, America's Hometown Horror, and, of course, Bar Talk, Old Colony, and Inebri-art Podcast, the original. So check those out and subscribe and comment so we can reach more people, and thanks for listening.